Hello, welcome to the Notts TV debate. I'm Frances Finn, and it's time to hear views on the news that affect us here in Nottinghamshire. I have another illustrious and local panel for you, so say hello to Andre Camilleri. He's a Conservative County Councillor representing Mansfield South. Anne Priest, good to see you. Anne is the chair of the Glasgow School of Art. She's also the International Consulting Dean of the Beijing Institute of Fashion Technology and former Pro-Vice Chancellor of Nottingham Trent University. And Jerome Edwards, who founded the Nottingham charity Matthew 2540, based in St Anne's. Great to see you all. We've got a lot to talk about, and there's been a budget. So we are going to start with what you made of Rachel Reeves' first budget, first female chancellor. But how has she tackled the funding deficit that she says the nation faces? What do you make of the savings? So let's start with the buses. There used to be a cap of £2 on a single bus trip. If the bus companies found that it cost them more to run that service, the government paid the difference. Now that cap is going up to £3 in January next year. So I'm just wondering, is that going to put you off using the buses? Do you think it was the right thing for them to do? Andre, let's start with you. Do you have sympathy? Do you have sympathy for the government? They are facing a tough time. We are all facing a tough time financially.
Well, they are, but they inherited an economy that was the strongest in the G7. There are problems.
How do you define strongest?
Well, it was the biggest growth in the G7.
Before we went to election. Period, but anyway, go on.
Yeah, we can argue it all day long. Yeah. And they'll argue, because if you mention 14 years again, it's too much. It's an easy take. Increase the prices by £1. Most people use the buses generally. Pensioners, they use them a lot. And
they have a bus pass?
Yeah, but not all of them.
They're entitled to one.
Not all of them. And I just think it's an easy take. It's just an easy take, easy money. And if you're in a rural area, you use the bus a lot. And it's an easy take. There are other things you can do.
Like?
They can find other ways. They can grow the economy properly, reduce taxes. Yeah.
The optics on it just don't look good. If I was a politician, to which I'm not, I think the connect between politicians and the people are widening. And for those easy takes, I think the connection with things as tangible, I think people are crying out for the tangible. How does the politics of which I vote for help me in my everyday life? And what have they just been recently elected? And that is going to be the first thing
and
of
this
which...
doesn't do it. This doesn't do it. It's interesting to ask, where is that money actually going? Because you're talking about pensioners, but most pensioners have a bus pass if they use the bus. So who is it hitting? It's hitting people who can't afford or don't drive into cities, drive to work, etc., etc. And it may sound a very small amount, but that's per trip.
And £2 a day, potentially. £10
absolutely.
a week.
I don't think this is a fair one. I think it's probably going to hit the wrong people, and I'm not sure where the money's actually going.
It's interesting you say that, because that was the argument against the winter fuel payment withdrawal, wasn't it? Because the Labour Party bills itself as the party for the working people, those that aren't so well off, and it did stick to its promise, though, not to increase taxes, working taxes. But once you make that promise, well, what other wriggle room was there, Anne, for them to claw back some money into the economy, into the government pot?
Yeah. Well, the outcome from this budget is going to be extremely interesting. I really feel they had to do a lot. They needed to do a lot. There's a lot wrong. They need to raise a lot of money. But actually, nothing is simple. Nothing is just, it's okay, we're going to charge businesses for the extra on the national insurance. What's going to happen to that? You know, prices will go up, food prices will go up, service prices will go up. So actually, it is going to hit everybody. You know, whatever you think is going to happen. So actually, it's not just about the first hit, it's what are the implications of all of these different activities that, you know, that they've done to raise money.
So on the buses then, you think that this is going to penalise people. Do you think, Jerome, from the people that you support through your charity, this is a big deal?
I think so. I think it is. I think it circles back to what I was saying. I think if you are already on the breadline and you do not have much, that £1, and unfortunately I was going to say this earlier, I can't remember where I heard this, but the help to travel scheme did increase the amount that people were able to travel. So for the ability to just get about and move across the city, that will have a detrimental effect on just social mobility. So yes, I think people that we connect with in terms of vulnerabilities and having to count pennies will be a detrimental effect to the daily cost.
Of course, it should be said that there are many bus journeys that don't cost more than £2 anyway. So if you're just on a short hop into town, you might live somewhere like St Anne's. I've no idea how much a single fare would cost, but it doesn't mean that every single fare is going to go up to £3. There are some that are still below £2. But for those slightly longer trips, that's what we're talking about here. But it should be said that pensioners are entitled to a bus pass. I don't think there are any. It's not means tested, Andre. So at least on this occasion, the older people aren't affected.
When I got my bus pass, I got it at 60.
Yes,
you don't get a bus pass till you're 67.
That's right.
And lots of people aren't working.
But they're not state pensioners, are they? At 60?
No. Well, that's another argument.
But if you can afford to retire at 60 now, you probably don't need a bus pass.
All right.
Do you think?
No. Oh, well, you're telling me. That's what you're telling me. I think that older people use these buses, and I think a lot of my good lady is 60. She uses the bus. She's 62, and it's gone up. And
that's right. Okay. Well, haven't nailed you down on therefore what else should the government have done instead? If not bus passes, if not winter fuel, what else should they be doing? I can tell you though one thing that they're doing, which might not necessarily affect thousands of us here in Nottinghamshire, but it does affect at least 200 farmers. I've done a little search online and 200 is the nearest figure I can get based on those that are registered on directory inquiries. But anyway, farmers, should there be inheritance tax on farms? So the situation until now has been that when you pass the farm on to the next generation, you're exempt from inheritance tax. It's a family business, same with other kinds of businesses. But now the government is saying if your estate is worth more than £1 million, whatever it's worth beyond that, you're going to have to pay some tax on. Now, farms, we've got a lot of land often. The farmhouses are not small. It's what farms are. So the argument is, this is affecting most farms. Is this the right thing to do? Is it fair on the farmers that when their kids take on the farms, they're going to have to pay some money to the government? What are you sensing, Jerome?
I'm sensing there's two things. How is it going to impact food and the cost of local produce? And let's put exported produce on the shelf, and then is it going to lose a potential generation that are wanting to get into farming? I don't know how appealing it is, completely removed, apart from the chickens that I do have. But other than that, I'm not quite sure as to how the generation would want to inherit their parents' estate and to continue the industry of farming. Pretty difficult to have.
I suppose the thinking, Anne, is that if I inherit my dad's house, which one day I will with my sister, we're going to have to pay inheritance tax. Why should a farming younger generation not have to pay inheritance tax on their family home?
I actually probably agree with that there should be inheritance tax on this land, these farms. However, I do think there's a lack of sensitivity here on this. If a family is going to continue to grow produce, sell it locally, it is part of the food chain, then it's not beyond the wit of man to put some kinds of subsidies over the years, that if they continue farming, if they continue to put their effort into the land, into growing food, there may be some support, which means that you eventually pull back that inheritance tax that you've had to pay. But I don't see why we couldn't have more sensitivity than just a block. We're going to charge you inheritance tax as you pass it on.
Yes.
Because what we do know is so many people actually have invested in land over the years. They don't farm, but they actually own the land and they're passing it on like an asset. Okay,
so you think there should be a tax on those that are making the farming system work for them. However, Andre, aren't there going to be farmers who, if their kids want to step up and take on the business, Where are they going to find tens of thousands of pounds of cash?
This is really causing problems within the farming community. There's going to be a big demonstration in London. Smaller farms that's gone passed between families over generations. That's apparently that could end. It's a lot of money. Anything over £1 million. Well, £1 million farm. Most farms are worth more than £1 million. They said you can pay the inheritance tax over 10 years.
That's got to help, doesn't it?
Well, if I was a young person, would you want to go into farming? They're making you not grow food. They want you to green everything up. Solar farms, there's massive solar farms that Labour are putting out all
Which can
around.
be more lucrative than actual farming, so that might be an appeal.
But we've seen how we're going to feed ourselves. We rely on those people to feed us. This has worked so many years. It's not just about the farms that we see, all the farms in the Dales, all these smaller units, they're all going to get taxed. Who's going to look after? I mean, the countryside is mainly, the beautiful countryside that we have in England and the UK is because the farmers have done this.
Well, that's the point that you hear, isn't it? That this isn't just a hard-nosed business venture.
No, of course it's
this
not.
is the curation and the nurture of our countryside, and it's our food security.
But that's where it lacks sensitivity, because for some people it is a hard-nosed business.
Yeah. Okay, but for others, yes, interesting. All right, well, we've run out of time in this part of the show, but do come back, because before the end of the programme, we will talk Donald Trump. Don't go away. TV debate. I'm Frances Finn, and your three panellists this episode are Councillor Andre Camilleri, Anne Priest and Jerome Edwards. So there's been a bit of tension running in Broxtowe when it comes to the cemeteries there. So Broxtowe Borough Council has decided that there are too many ornaments, decorations, let's say paraphernalia around some of the graves in the cemeteries. So it said there was going to be a ban on this extra adornment, but some of the families feel very strongly about this and say, well, when we bought the plot, we weren't told about these rules, and the way we want to grieve is important to us. That's how we do it. So now they've had a meeting and the Borough Council has said we're going to suspend that ban for a year. It raises the question though, doesn't it? How do you feel about mourners going to the grave and, well, doing what they want to do? Sometimes you see teddies, sometimes you see plastic flowers, sometimes it's the paper around the flowers that, builds up on the graves. And you do hear some people complaining about it, that it can look a little bit untidy. Anne, what's your feeling about it?
Well, I think they should let them do it. I think maybe they might want to say within the bounds of your plot, because once you start going over onto other plots, maybe it's a problem. I don't see why you would want to ban it. It's what people want to do, to celebrate their loved ones, to, spend time, by the graveside and so on.
Yes, I think it's a sort of grey area on whether it is encroaching on other plots. Getting the mower around the edges of the gravestones, and if you've got things sort of slightly jutting out, they're saying that if someone wants to have some ashes interred in the next door plot, sometimes it can be very difficult to really get access to it. And
yeah, I've got a loved one on the graveside, and I do remember that there can be a little bit of excess when it comes to grieving loved ones. So I could imagine the powers that be being stuck between a rock and a hard place for those people that do. It's hard to call it excess in order to then figure out what is then sensitive to other people. So it is a tough one to have. But I think the less, the better, out of, I guess, the sensitivity for the area.
Is this snobbery, do you think? Is it some people think, oh, that's a little bit,
That's what I asked
too much?
myself, because I don't like it.
Yeah.
But, it's not
What
to
if
do
it's
with
next
me,
to
it's
your,
to do with...
What if it's someone who really likes to keep it simple? They take their fresh cut flowers, they keep it looking very minimal and tidy because that's how they like it. But right next door, you've got a kind of mountain of teddy bears and...
Yeah, that's what I've experienced.
And plastic models.
Well, you see that you see that on housing estates, exactly the same.
Yeah.
Some people care about things and look after and keep it tidy. Some people aren't like that. I think it's a council maintenance.
I just need to come back in defence of these mourners. They would not say they don't care.
No,
they just want to mourn in a certain way, and it means something to them to have photos there, to have some of them have put different multicoloured sort of glass down on the bed of the grave, quite bright colours.
They don't say they don't care, but they may care, they may do a wonderful job, but not everybody does.
But it's not to everyone's taste.
You leave it grows, and there's a maintenance part. It's a very emotive subject.
Yeah.
I go along with that, and I've not got a real problem with it, as long as they keep it tidy and within respecting other people's gravesites.
Yeah, I think perhaps you have hit the nail on the head there, that if there's care taken,
That's right.
if it's by design and it's how they want it and it doesn't spill out, but it's how you manage that.
But it's
How
very
you manage
difficult
that.
for us to say that we should be telling other people how to grieve,
right.
Yeah.
how to spend time with their deceased loved ones. I mean, I do think that's problematic. Over time, culture, society has changed, and it's accepted that you might do something a little bit more, overt, perhaps a bit more extrovert.
I think that is something also to note when you have tragic accidents, roadside accidents where people have died, and you see now there is an outpouring often. People will go and there'll be flowers and there'll be the wrappings of the flowers, and they are left, and then sometimes they'll be renewed, but we didn't used to see that, did we? I think that there was that kind of Princess Diana watershed where that's how everybody responded, and now it's almost expected if there's been a sudden death, certainly. But again, is there any harm in it?
I think it's the management and the upkeep.
That's right.
And I think as soon as it is very sensitive, but I think the maintenance of that upkeep, especially with graveyards, do not continue after long periods of time, generally speaking. So for the council having to put the hard line, they have probably seen a few ruin it for quite a lot. They've drawn a hard line, then kind of losing the sensitivity to how do we express that. So it is hard, but I probably would lean into a little bit more of a clinical side of the plots.
And the council had a meeting with some of the families that are mourning. Some of them have lost their kids, and they've decided they will now use this next 12 months to really come to some shared goals and agreements, which is probably a sensible way forward, isn't it? All right, now we'll move on. And there were some interesting statistics that were revealed this week, which is that the fertility rate in England and Wales is at an all-time low. Women now are having, on average, 1.44 children. Now, globally, this is the case too. It's not just in the Western world. Across the globe, the birth rate is changing. So, back to 1950, globally, 5 births per woman. Now, it's 2.3. So in some nations, it's higher, but it's still 2.3 globally and 1.44 here. What's going on? Why are we not having as many children? I'll ask you, Anne, as a woman. What's your take on it?
Yes, because I've only got one.
Me too.
I think it's a very hard decision these days. People want to work. Life's very expensive. Life seems to be, easier for those with several salaries coming in. You might want to think about whether you want to bring children into the world at the moment. Our environment is quite challenging, not just, the geopolitical environment, the social environment, the culture. These are problematic times, and maybe people wonder whether it's the right time to have children.
Yes, and what's interesting is when you dig down into the data, it's not just those that are more wealthy that are deciding, or it's not just the poor, rather, that can't afford it. It's like every demographic, it's come down.
Yeah, well, times have changed. When I was in my teenagers and things, contraception wasn't there. People had babies. It was a different world. Contraception has made a big difference. And like I say, people want careers, and they keep putting babies off until late in their lives. And I think there is a syndrome called the precious child syndrome. You've got one child, and you have them later on, and that's your precious little. If anything should happen to that, that's why you get the spoiled child and the way that it's brought out.
Steady on there. I've got one child and she is not spoiled.
I don't say I agree with that, but there is something in it. You get a child in your third. You would in your 30s when you had probably late on.
Yes.
And the fear of losing that one. When we were, if you got 5 children, I know it's great, but you lost one, you got 4. But it's a different world now.
Interesting. I mean, there is something, isn't there? And I think that women certainly now compared to 50 years ago are freer to choose.
That's right.
We choose, and I think those of us, that get stuck into jobs in our 20s, we do want to kind of see what happens. And then sometimes you're not able to have a child or more than one, and so on, because your fertility rate declines the longer you leave it. But I have my theory, which is with more women working full time than ever before, we're shattered. And it's not just an added luxury, to make your life happier having kids. It's tough.
It's a serious commitment.
It's tough, yeah.
And the fact is that the majority of that commitment falls on the woman.
Yeah.
And what we haven't spoken about is actually whether couples actually stay together, whether they feel that they can rely on a partner. Yeah. There are so many factors here, but I think culture, society, what you want out of your life has changed. So.
Could I just say, you say that it is difficult for everybody working. You imagine being in the 50s, and I can remember that far back, with 5 children. You say the woman didn't come to the end of the day, absolutely shattered.
No, 100%.
It was a different world, but there has been a breakdown in family life. You don't have Sunday dinners together. There's only 3 of you. The world has changed.
Yeah.
But some people might say not for the better.
Let me just throw something in before the break. The reason this is actually a big concern across the globe with certain people is that it skews the ratio of those that are older to those that are younger. So in the UK in the 1950s, there were 5 people in work to every pensioner, state pensioner. Now there are 3 workers to every pensioner. By 2050, in the UK, it's predicted to be 2 workers to 1 pensioner. So that's a massive welfare bill. Healthcare, this has an impact. What do we make of it? I mean, we think this has been a difficult budget. Think about it in 20 years.
So we are in an ageing population, and there's a lot to go out of this, but especially with the precious child syndrome. But the ageing population, can I count myself as the younger? But how can us then look after an ageing world? And that's going to instantly change the engagement of how we engage with other people. And then you include the dynamic of technology. How do we then include technology just as to the ways in which we talk to one another?
Plenty of challenges. Goodness me. Well, we're going to talk about some more of those in the next part of the Notts TV debate, including should we make smacking children illegal? That's come up again. Don't go away. Back in a few moments. Back. It's the Notts TV debate. I'm Frances Finn, and your panellists are Andre Camilleri, Anne Priest and Jerome Edwards, and we are chewing over the news, and it's from a Nottinghamshire perspective. Let's dive into a really local story. Have you been to Beeston and seen the artwork, the sculpture that's in the middle of the town? It's been nicknamed the Stump by locals, and what's happened is they've decided there that they don't want it in the middle anymore because it's taking up room and perhaps there could be other stuff, more uses for that space. So they are moving it somewhere else, somewhere a little bit more out of the way. That's all going to cost money. And also today, as we record, we learned that the sundial in Sutton in Ashfield, this huge piece of art, it's a giant sundial, biggest in the world apparently, that's had its day. They're going to shift that out and I think just get rid of it completely. So I'm just wondering about public art. What do you make of it? Is it worth the money? Let's stick with the stump in Beeston. Arty, or awful? Andre, you've seen it.
Well,
What do you make
I've
of
seen
it?
public art. Most people, you put a piece of public art up, and they'll say it's a waste of money. What do you want that for? That's it. But we need some kind of culture. You need to have some kind of art around, don't you? You do that, but it's the kind of quality. I mean, I was talking about the other day about the Bentinck Memorial in Mansfield. That's been controversial since the day it was put up in 1880.
And describe that.
Well, it's just a spire in the middle of Mansfield Marketplace. And it was incomplete. There was going to be a portrait bust of the guy who died. It was the son of the Duke of Portland going in the centre of it, and you've got this smack in the middle, and that's been controversial. Public art, I like some public art. I like to see it. We've got it in Mansfield that reflects the industry that we've had in town.
Yeah.
So.
That, I mean, you have it. I mean, you've got the shoes there, which is at least it kind of symbolic of something, isn't it? Yeah. The beast and stump is actually called the Waterhead. It's been there 35 years. I'm going to be honest, I don't like it. I just think it looks chunky, not very arty. What do I know? I'm not an arty person necessarily. You are, Anne. What do you make of it?
Well, I won't talk about that particular piece, but in general...
Because you want to be able to go back to Beeston.
Yes.
Yeah.
In general, public art is a good thing. It's a very good thing. It brings people together, you know, it gives you a focal point, it lifts people's quality of life. If you look at any public art, largely there are people gathered around it. They will come to see it, or at least they'll find it as a focal point of their lives. You know, you could say the lions are a piece of public
That's a really
art.
good point.
Absolutely.
You know,
However, the lions are the lions. I mean, they look like lions. They sort of signify something that we relate to. They're creatures. This waterhead, I mean, okay, it's subjective art, but isn't that the issue when you're spending public money, Jerome? It's subjective. I wouldn't have wanted the money to have spent on that particular piece of art because it's not my thing. So do we have to have some boundaries, some control? Maybe a survey. Let's do it by democracy. Do you like it? Do you not like it? If we like it, great, we'll have it.
I think we've got it good in Notts because we've got a few good statues, Brian Clough, Robin Hood and the Lions, and then you go to New Art Exchange and there's some cool stuff. What we're doing now, to kind of touch on the modernised element, what we're trying to do now, St Anne's, and gardening and plants, I think that's a form of art in its shape, is trying to figure out what do younger generation want to see and how do they want to create their creative expression within their communities. Because very quickly, some of the arts that you've mentioned have been there for, 35 years. Yeah.
Which isn't really very long, is it? We got fed up with it after 35 years. What does that say?
That's not very long. And actually, you know, you could talk about quality. You're right, it's subjective. I wouldn't have a problem with it being moved. I mean, you might say per day, the cost per day will probably be fairly reasonable if it's been there 35 years.
The most popular work of art that was moved from the Victoria Centre was the clock.
Yeah.
The clock. And it was a tragedy that they moved the clock from where it was outside Boots. People used to stand around, watch the clock. Yeah. My kids were fascinated. It's wonderful. Yeah. Now they shoved it up. Somebody decided, well, we don't want to do it. We need the space. We'll shove it up there. So that's a bad thing to do.
Yeah.
And incidentally, I hated that clock. But I did accept that when it was going to be moved and when it was moved, people were desperately upset because it was their focal point.
Yes, and I think if the lions were ever removed, there'd be another revolution, wouldn't there? A rebellion.
Somebody might say that the lions is a reflection of our past, the strength of the empire. They may say no. You may get somebody say somewhere along the line, well, those lines reflect a different era. Yeah. We don't like this. That's very about the empire.
Just so finally then, what about the suggestion that any public art, there needs to be some sort of public involvement in what we're choosing
that's very good. I
to
like
fund.
Gerard's point about looking to a new generation and what they would want to see,
Yeah.
what they would expect. You know, what do they want in these places? What do they want to use?
Yeah,
I mean,
because
the
it
market
seems to be
square
decided in some sort of
horrible.
meeting somewhere behind closed doors. I don't know what they were drinking at the time, some of these decisions, and then it's plonked on us.
The market square has been ruined over so many years. There's been so many different things happening in the market square. And it really is not very good.
All right.
It's not, we are moving the county hall is moving to Newark next year.
Yeah.
And we've been having discussions about civic pride. Do we want to put anything in there that reflects Nottinghamshire like the county hall?
We will wait and see, Andre.
Yes, okay.
Make sure that it's nothing too modern that we don't
No,
understand.
that's right. I agree.
Yeah.
Totally.
I'm joking.
Absolutely.
What?
Modern art. Modern art, like the
do.
water. Anyway,
Oh my goodness.
anyway, no, I'm subjective. You see, that's the point. Now, a more serious question for you. The issue of smacking children has come to the fore again. This is because the current Education Secretary, Labour's Bridget Phillipson, says she's open-minded about making smacking illegal. You're not really allowed to do it now unless it's reasonable punishment. However, the circumstances of each case determine whether a smack is considered reasonable. So it's a grey area. Is the solution just ban the whole lot? No tapping, slapping, whatever. Doesn't matter how naughty a child is. Jerome?
I love my mum. She did, however, give me some corrective forms of parenting by smack, and reflective. I think that was healthy.
Really? What? Sorry to be really personal here.
No, go for it.
But what would be a smackable offence compared to a
wow.
non-smackable offence?
I think genuine disobedience. Now, this is kind of where, again, it's because it's so subjective. Do you just want to say, do not come in home past the hours of 10? And you come in at 10:01, or do you come in at 1 a.m.? Yeah. Or disrespect, again, subjectivity and disrespect. Yeah. And then how much is just a gentle smack or a beating? There's so much difference in do you use an object, do you just use your hand? I think, thinking about this, I think there is a instilling of respect and fear, and it's in cultures as well. I think that's definitely a big thing. In most Jamaican cultures, not all Jamaican cultures, that is a part of parenting. So to then remove that and make it to make it illegal, hey, it is very difficult, but then instantly comes in the topic of domestic abuse.
Well, interesting, yeah, that you say there may be a cultural element, but I remember Kemi Badenoch, when she was on with Laura Koonsberg, saying that not all cultures are equal in terms of how we should be integrating them, accepting them and validating them. Is a culture where it is normal to smack, hit, let's call it assault a child,
Well,
acceptable?
Going back to the fact there's only one child in every house, slightly different.
There isn't one child in every house, by the way.
Well, no, the average is one child.
Some have got none, some have got three.
So you should be able to handle that. When there were 5 kids in the house, I should imagine it was a bit of a handful. And to keep a bit of discipline, they would have had to do that.
Well, do teachers go around smacking all the kids?
It's not about numbers.
Go on.
It's not about numbers. It's about the parent losing control most of the time.
If you've got 5 kids, bringing 5 children up, your time is difficult. What I'm saying is there are different ways to discipline a child, and I think that now that smacking is the last resort to do it.
But you think that a parent, if it decides that's the best way forward, it should still have that right?
Well, like I say, I'm in between that, because I brought kids up, I was smacked, I was caned, I've been caned, we talk about school, all that. Did it affect me? Look, I mean, I'm still outspoken, still as gobby as I ever was.
All right, and I really need
But
to
I think that's the point. What's the outcome of this? Because actually, in my heart of hearts, I think actually probably the light tap, a small amount of discipline. But you can't, how are you going to police that? How are you going to check that? So really you're going to have to say it's not fair, it's not reasonable, because you can't actually stop someone who moves from the light tap to the assault. And what's the outcome? That child Does that mean that they're going to smack someone else? Does that mean that they are going to
establishing a circle of violence?
Exactly. And it might not just be in the family and about discipline, it might be something else.
And I wonder how many times a child is smacked when the parent just makes a cold light of day, calm-headed decision, that's what I'm going to do. Often it's a flare-up of temper and they lash out. And if you know that's illegal, perhaps that's the curb you need to stop you from doing it?
Yes, well, when I was a child, I was smacked. I was smacked a lot. And when I had a child, I remember the feeling when I became so angry.
Yeah.
That
was the response that came to you.
I wanted to use that response and I stopped myself.
Interesting. All right, just come back for the final part of the Notts TV debate in a moment. Welcome back to the final part of the Notts TV debate. And this episode, we've been putting the world to rights. We've had the budget to chew over. It's all thanks to my local panel, Andre Camilleri, Anne Priest and Jerome Edwards. I think now we need to put America to rights, if that's all right. As we record, the result of the election hasn't come through. But I'm just wondering, Trump or Harris? What do you make of what's going on over there? Andre? You're more involved in politics directly than these two.
Yeah, I'm probably more Trump fan than most people. I think Trump. First of all, let's say I can't believe that he's the only two people they can find to be president of the United States. But out of the two, the last time he was in, there was no wars for 4 years. He seemed to have sorted that out. How he did it?
Did he sort it out?
Well, yeah, he was in charge. He's the man. He's in charge. Yeah, he sorted it out.
Do you think the other nations feared what he might do?
Well, he may do. They may fear that. So let's bring a bit of that in. If he stops people being killed in Gaza and places like that, I will vote for Trump. But Kamala Harris, I don't really know. I think she's just there because Joe Biden's been retired off and it was easy to put her there. I'm just amazed that they can't find better people than that. But Trump proved himself the 4 years. The economy was good. He sorted the wars out. There was no killing, and I think that was so. Therefore, I would support him.
The Democrats very much dispute the narrative that Trump likes to put out there about his time. I don't think the economy grew as he'd promised. I think there was still immigration. There were still jobs being lost in industry. I don't think he did deliver on many of the things he promised, but people quickly forget that, don't they?
I think the conversation's ever so slightly shifting from what can the person in authority do to what they represent. And I don't think now representative of leadership it creates too much of a divide. And I can understand that Trump represents far right, generally a form of, how can I say this, nationality.
Some people have called him a fascist, it's out there.
And there we are.
Misogynist? What else would you like?
All of that.
But does any of that, does that concern you in a world leader, Andre?
No. You asked me a question, do I prefer Donald Trump to Kamala Harris? And I told you that they could pick anyway. I just think that nowadays people are fed up with the politicians that we get. They're all the same. The educated, highly educated, university graduates come into politics, know very little about life and telling you how to run your life. Most of the people who set the budget have never worked in a proper business, never handled money, and there they are telling you how to run your life, taxing you, telling you what to do. And that's why people vote for the likes of Trump, and Farage is much as the same kind of thing. He can say what he likes. People are ready to listen to it. The ordinary man in the street who's not university educated, who's went to a normal school, yes, he will vote, or she will vote for a man like him or a woman like him.
Well, we're talking about branding and representation and all sorts of things here, aren't we? I mean, I think you're right. I cannot believe that these are the only two people in the United States who really should be running for president. This is just terrible. And you talk about no wars when Trump was in the... The gun lobby, he's so misogynist. He incites problems and violence
He's a
everywhere
convicted
he
felon.
goes.
I mean, there's not much lower to go, really, is there?
He's an appalling
In terms of a
person.
personal character.
Absolutely. However, what I will say is that Kamala Harris, I'm really, really unsure about.
Really?
I'm not sure. I mean, you know, I applaud. Is she mixed race? I'm not sure, but she's certainly not, you know, white, middle class lady. You know, she's
a middle class lady.
She's very bright. I'm not sure whether she's a doer, whether she can get things done. I'm not entirely sure of everything that she stands for, because it all feels a little bit as if what she's doing is attacking Trump rather than standing up for things. So I'm not sure about her, but for sure I don't want Trump. For sure I don't want like what he represents. He's, you know, if I was an American, to think that he represented me as my president, I would just be appalled. Just appalled.
I think, yeah, the connection to the branding of the person, the integrity, I think is now, us as people, we're beginning to shift to that being more of the focus, rather than what can you do for the country? How are you going to represent my voice toward the country in the global community? I think that is incredibly important.
But he represents a lot of what people think. In England, the same. That's why people support reform. The majority of reform people are conservatives who are worried about immigration. And they feel that we don't deal with it. The politician you get now, the champagne socialists, the left wing of the Tory party aren't interested. So they will vote for somebody like Trump, Farage. That's it. Until politicians realise that these people matter, this is what you're going to get. Another Trump will come along, and you could have Farage is not the English Trump. It's close on. It's the same kind of thing. I don't know if you agree with that.
I think. I mean, it's not for me to have my opinions on this show.
Sorry, I'm not.
But as far as you two are concerned, I think much has been said, hasn't it, about the likes of Trump and Farage speaking in a way that, let's say 10 years ago, politicians weren't allowed to speak like that. They were cancelled, they were accused of being racist. The whole pressure that they say immigration puts on our services. Now, that's a whole argument about whether immigration, you know, we could have that for hours and hours and hours, but there are some people who blame immigration, high immigration, for their misfortune, don't they? Whether they're right or wrong. And people like Trump, Farage, Robert Jenrick, they're hanging it on that.
They play on it.
Yeah, exactly.
The thing is, if you meet ordinary people and you talk to them about immigration, and one of the arguments that, say, Lee Anderson said, I speak it like my people in Ashfield. I'm like, well, I speak like people from Mansfield, but I don't hold his views.
Yeah.
But they like that. People like that thing.
But they play on people's insecurities, on their sense of injustice, on their sense of entitlement. You know, that's what they play on.
That's populist
people who, you know, feel that working hard, and okay, they might not have everything they want, but they don't have that same sense of injustice and entitlement which these people
and the
play on.
Democrats are saying that people like Donald Trump are playing on the fears, they're playing on the insecurities, they're playing on the vulnerabilities and the lack of education, not because they care about necessarily raising them up, but they do want the power.
But
that's
they
the
want
criticism
power,
that the Democrats are levelling at Donald Trump. How do you know that Trump is going to deliver for the people should he become the president? What are the signs?
I don't know. But they believe that. And what I'm saying is, until politicians get into the real world, both in America and here, and become more and think about what the majority of population think. If you go to, no disrespect to people who are highly educated politicians, they think they know better, and they don't know better.
I really want to hear you, Jerome, on
Sorry.
this. What do you think?
No. I think we've lost, and this is kind of my views, I think we've lost the art of the middle ground. I think these politicians are chasing toward who can say the most inflammatory thing, and that's where we're so used to. We're figuring out who is the enemy, and then it creates an us and them between the nationalists, the sense of entitlement that you mentioned, and who can I pin that blame on in order to get what is rightfully mine, especially with the driving of national. So we've lost the art of the middle ground to be able to not to be so inflammatory in what we're saying and then create a fury in order to generate momentum for anything.
It's also about personal power. About personal power, not about doing the right thing to enable a nation to thrive and prosper.
Yeah, that's good.
I'm going to put a full stop there and we'll see what transpires. Just to finish, I'm just wondering whether you think that Christmas is coming a bit too early. I know we do talk about this every year, but the Winter Wonderland in Nottingham is opening on the 13th of November. Some stores across the city and the county have had their Christmas stock in since the schools went back in September. There was a garden centre near me that opened its Christmas display about 3 weeks ago. How are you feeling? Jerome, how are you feeling? Can you never have Christmas too early? Can never be too early?
It's just the Mariah Carey song that I get scared of a little bit. But otherwise...
Your chickens don't like Christmas, do they know?
No.
I've asked your stepdad to come in. My daughter was decorating pumpkins with like, flowers and whatnot while having a constant loop of Christmas music on YouTube on the big telly.
See?
And I was shouting,
No, too soon.
Definitely too early. Definitely too early. You know, it's not special, is it? You know,
that's the problem.
and it's so sad. You know, if we wait a bit longer, then it becomes something special and surprising and all. It's not. It's not special. It's not surprising.
I think
It's a shame.
for lots of people it's lovely, but if you are the one in the family that makes Christmas happen, it is quite wearing, Andre.
Christmas-
I bet you find that.
I do all the work, I imagine. But like I say, I think you're right, Anne. Christmas was a special time. I look back to all these years, and Christmas was, because it was probably a week before you get excited about Christmas. Bonfire night, or Halloween didn't really exist, and they're all made up, don't they? Not for you to enjoy Christmas or
It's for
they're
your
made
one
it for
special
the money.
precious child now, isn't it,
Yeah,
Andre?
one special child. Well, you probably shower her with gifts and everything.
Well, on that, we'll have to leave it because we've come to the end of the show. Thanks so much for watching, and thank you to you, Andre Camilleri, Anne Priest, and Jerome Edwards. I'm Frances Finn, and we'll see you again soon for another Notts TV debate. Bye-bye.
Thank you.